today, I don't know if you noticed, but someone commented on one of our YouTube videos. I don't usually notice them right away. I usually go through later to look at comments and stuff, but it just so happened to pop up on my phone. And someone was like, "This is AI generated content. This isn't real." And I was like, "Excuse me, matey. It absolutely is real." I was like, "These are our real voices, and I spend hours editing the videos. How could you assume it's not real?"
And this has happened before.
That's wild to me. I mean,
Do we sound like robots?
maybe. I will say some people I have heard have trouble figuring us apart.
I have heard that too, which I think is wild because I feel like we sound very different.
I think so too. But maybe to the untrained, un-Canadian ear? I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, and I just thought that was really, first of all, odd, but also, how dare you? We put a
Right?
lot of time and effort into this.
Yeah, can you imagine if we did this all with AI? We'd be like, done, done, done.
Yes. We put a considerable amount of hours per week into this, and I'm a little salty about
Right?
that.
I'll have you people know I panic write each script before we record with sheer
Exactly.
and real panic. You can't fake this.
No. So I would just like to say, for anyone else wondering out there, this is not AI, because I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina.
And this is the Grim Curriculum.
Hello.
And this is not AI.
I like that intro.
Goddamn.
That was fun. I like it when we change it up a little bit. We've been doing this for almost 3 years.
Yeah, coming up in March. Crazy.
Isn't that weird?
2022,
That blows
and
my
we are
mind.
coming up on 2025.
I know. Actually, funny, off topic,
Yes.
but weird. I walked past a lingerie store recently and I saw a pair of panties that said 2025 on the butt in like really big print. And immediately in my head, I went 2015 and I was like, why would it say that? And I was like, holy shit, it's almost 2025.
I know. I have been graduated, or come June of 2025, I will have been out of high school for 15 years.
It's crazy.
I don't feel old enough to have been out of high
No.
school for 15 years.
Absolutely not.
Anywho.
We're trying to keep this light because this episode is anything but. We're about to embark on a rough journey together with this series.
Yes, we really are. Our latest subject may not be as well known as other serial killers, but he is truly the epitome of evil.
There is no doubt about that. We want to warn you all that this series is going to cover some very, very difficult to hear information.
We know that our usual subject matter is, of course, grim, but this is one of those cases that goes above and beyond that.
It's one of those stories that is upsetting for a number of reasons, but also because he is one of those people that should have been caught early on.
These stories always piss me off.
Oh, you're going to be mad.
So today, we are starting our series on Rodney Alcala, also known as the Dating Game Killer, a nickname he earned due to the fact that he appeared on the then popular show, The Dating Game, while at the height of his murders.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the show, a woman was given the choice between 3 different bachelors. Their faces were hidden from her, and she was given the task of choosing one to go on a date with by asking a series of questions for them to answer.
Shockingly enough, Rodney was the one chosen during this episode. The date was canceled at the very last minute because the woman had had a bad feeling about him. We'll be sharing more about that later in this episode and next week, and we're going to play a portion of the show for you guys as well.
I'm excited to play the portion of the show because why'd you choose him, girl? First of all, I don't know. We'll discuss it next week.
We certainly will.
It's something you really need to hear to believe.
I'm looking forward to it in the sense that I want to get the full picture of this case, but also like, ew, gross, nasty, skin crawling. Ugh.
Have you watched the clip of him on the show?
I have seen it, but it was a very long time ago, and it was probably around the same time I first heard of him, and I don't know much about him.
Okay, don't watch it again until we play it, because I genuinely want your reaction, because you're going to throw up all over the studio.
You know me and cringe. We do not go together well.
His story was most recently seen in the film Woman of the Hour, directed by Anna Kendrick, who also stars as the dating game contestant Cheryl Bradshaw.
Rodney was active for approximately a decade, with the majority of his crimes happening throughout the 70s.
That is as far as we know. He would ultimately be charged and sentenced to death for the murders of 5 women, but the number could be as high as the triple digits.
He was active around the same time as our good friend Ted Bundy and the Hillside Stranglers, and he is thought to be one of America's worst serial killers.
Rodney Alcala is one of those people who is terrifying, not because he is an obvious monster.
Oh, because he's so kind of like mundane.
Well, he was very charming and very easy to get along with. He's someone that would make people feel comfortable until that mask was taken off. And then when that mask came off, it was too late. To me, that's so much scarier.
Absolutely, because we all know those certain people that you look at them and they're kind of maybe what you would think of, maybe in your mind stereotypically, a serial killer. You're like, for whatever reason, that person gives me the willies.
Yeah.
But to have someone sort of get inside your barriers before you realize it's too late because they are so charming, it is terrifying.
I saw it once and I'll never unsee it. I really think he reminds me of Handsome Squidward.
Rodney Alcala?
Yes, I don't know why, but I see that and I see him, and I am so far the only one who thinks that, but I'm sticking to it. But people would go off about, he's so charming, he's so handsome, he's so flirtatious. I like it. And I just see Handsome Squidward. I don't know.
Maybe the 70s was a different time for the scope of what people found attractive. Do you know what I mean?
He had the hair.
I guess so. He certainly doesn't do it for me, but obviously I know all of the gross, and gruesome details that we'll get into. He did not just kill, he hunted. These weren't quick murders by any means. He would toy with his victims, often strangling them to the point of unconsciousness, only to let them wake up so that he could do it again. Sometimes this would happen multiple times before he finally killed them. He was truly a wolf in sheep's clothing.
We have a lot to go over for part 1 here, so let's get right into it.
Rodney Alcala was born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucor on August 23, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas, to parents Raul Alcala Bucor and Ana Maria Gutierrez. He was the third of 4 children and their only son. In 1951, the family relocated to Mexico.
As a young child, Rodney was fairly well-liked and seemed to be a good kid. He did well in school, and he didn't really have a hard time making friends. When he was 12 years old, his father abandoned the family, who then relocated to Los Angeles.
Life continued on for them, and as Rodney grew, he maintained his grades, played the piano, and had no problems getting dates. He also began to develop a passion for photography and served on the yearbook staff in high school. He was also on the track team, which seemed like he's a very well-rounded,
normal kid.
Individual at this point.
Yeah, oftentimes when we talk about the early life of these people, and that's why I like to talk about it, is you see those red flags where you're like, oh. But with him, so far, there is nothing. After he graduated, Rodney joined the United States Army in the hopes of becoming a paratrooper, but he ended up working as a clerk. This is when people started to see some red flags. His commanding officer noted that he could be manipulative at times and that he was also extremely vindictive.
In 1962, Rodney learned the fact that his father had passed away. It also came out that Raul had started a new family. This was something that devastated Rodney. It was around that time that he went AWOL and hitchhiked from Fort Bragg to California to see his mom.
No, he said that he did it to see his mom, but he kind of just showed up.
It was probably he's gone absent without leave from the army, which is punishable in most armies by prison.
Yes, absolutely.
And so he probably really had nowhere else to go, so he went to his mom's house.
His career in the army lasted 4 years. He was discharged on medical grounds after he went AWOL. A military psychologist diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder.
That kind of surprises me. There are obviously a list of things that would make you exempt from joining the military throughout militaries around the world. But a lot of the times, in order to be sort of diagnosed that way, you have to be pretty crazy because the army will take just about anyone. So, and especially in those days as well.
Oh, and here, I read a theory about that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I read a theory that was Did he have antisocial personality disorder, or did they just kind of want to get rid of him?
That's
But
entirely possible.
I honestly think it was a little bit of both.
It probably was. They were probably like, look, buddy, you're just not very good at this, and you don't really seem to want to be here anyway.
Yeah.
Let's just get you out of here.
There were instances where he'd be like sitting down and his commanding officer would be like, Rodney, I need you to do blah, blah, blah. And he'd just sit there and be like, yeah, okay.
Whereas I have friends or friends of friends who have literally told like the recruiting officer, like, yeah, I probably have ADHD. And the recruiting officer's like, I didn't hear that. So like,
I was eager to hear from you about the military stuff because of your past.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. There are rules,
of
obviously,
course, yeah,
but it's really not hard. For example, my dad left school at 15 years old, did not get a full education by any means, did not go to university, obviously, did not go to college, went straight into the Marines as soon as he could. He didn't even graduate high school per se, and the Marines let him in. So the bar is low. Do they make fantastic soldiers and Marines and obviously there is people out there that are not what you would call highly educated, but they're damn good at whatever it is they're damn good at doing. And some people are damn good at being a soldier.
Definitely.
So yeah, but Rodney seems like a bit of a wet noodle, honestly.
I find it interesting because he didn't show those signs beforehand, but he definitely does after this. And my theory there, again, I have a lot of theories when it comes to Beaver Bear. My theory there is that he hid it well enough. And then once he got diagnosed with it, that's kind of when that mask starts to slip and he's like, I'll be myself just a little bit more.
Well, either that or he figured out that he could start using this quote unquote diagnosis as like an excuse for not doing shit. It's like, I don't have to do that. I have antisocial personality disorder. I don't have to do that. Oh, am I an asshole to you? Actually, it's my disorder. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a get out of jail free card in that sense.
This is kind of up until like later, much, much, much later, unfortunately, it wouldn't get brought up again.
Oh, shit. So red flag appeared and then red flag did not appear again for some time.
Exactly.
After this, he graduated from the UCLA School of Fine Arts, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree. So he's good at something.
He's a smart guy. His IQ was measured at a genius level, and he was known by other students as, again, a charming and likable fella.
Well, little did they know, he was getting ready for what would be considered his first major crime.
And we say considered because many believe that he had victimized people before this.
Whoa. On September 25th, 1968, Rodney was driving down Sunset Boulevard when he spotted 8-year-old Tali Shapiro. He pulled over and started talking to her. Rodney told her that he was a friend of her parents and offered her a ride to school. Initially, she declined, but he continued to talk to her and eventually made her more comfortable.
He offered to show her a pretty picture, and she got into the car with him. No. That wouldn't work on kids nowadays.
No, they'd be like, yeah, that's fucking boring. Drive along, mister.
Yeah, right? But back then, he's like, hey, I got this picture. It's really pretty. I have a bunch of pretty pictures. Come in and see them.
I hate, we've talked about stuff like this before. I hate that we have to teach kids so young sort of the ways of the world. You know, do not take candy from strangers. If a strange person drives up, you know, like, don't trust them unless they have a passcode that we've previously agreed upon. Like, the world shouldn't behave like this. And yet, because of assholes like Rodney Alcala, we have to.
One of the things that I liked about the Anna Kendrick movie was that she really did a good job of painting a picture of the dangers that are present for the average single woman.
Yes, and maybe dangers that are not considered by other people.
Exactly.
Thankfully, during all of this, a man named Donald Haynes saw the whole thing unfold and followed the car. He watched her go into his apartment and alarm bells immediately went off. He called the police and begged them to investigate what he saw. Thank God for Donald.
Yeah, he followed them and he called the LAPD and he was like, listen, this might not be anything, but if I don't tell you about this, I'm literally not going to be able to sleep again.
Absolutely.
So please at least investigate this. But this was a very busy time for the LAPD.
Oh, no.
So they did arrive at Rodney's apartment, but it took a while for them to show up. When they did arrive, Rodney popped his head out and he said he had just gotten out of the shower and he needed a moment before he could answer the door.
They waited and waited, but he didn't come back, so they decided to go inside. What they saw could only be described as a nightmare.
The room was surrounded with provocative photographs of young girls and blood that led into the kitchen. There they found Tally, who was naked and laying in her own blood. Her legs were spread open and a t-shirt was shoved into her mouth to stop her from screaming. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten with a steel bar.
Like, this piece of shit.
Like, this is a child.
When we said this man is the worst, he fucking is.
You know, I was trying to compare him to other people that we've covered because I was like looking through what we've covered in the last few months. We haven't done anything this fucking dreadful in a hot minute. And he reminds me of Danny Rolling.
Yes.
So much.
Absolutely. That also, when you mentioned like the Hillside Stranglers and Ted Bundy, Danny Rolling definitely came to mind.
Yeah.
The same bar he had beaten her with had been placed over her neck in an attempt to suffocate her slowly.
And that's why people think this wasn't his first crime.
Because that's a very niche thing to do to someone.
It's escalation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you don't start with that.
No, and a lot of people who do strangle as their method, the first time they try, they fuck it up.
Yes.
Because people don't realize how hard it is to manually strangle someone to death with your bare hands. It takes a very long time and it takes constant pressure to be applied, which takes a lot of strength and energy.
There are two kind of main theories. One is that he was doing the thing where he would strangle her until she passed out and then let go. And then once she came to, he would do it again and again and again. But the other theory is that, because one thing to consider is he never really confessed to any of this. He's one of those people that to the end, he was like, I didn't do it, which makes him even worse.
Absolutely.
But they basically believe that when the police showed up and when he was like, oh, I'm in the shower, give me a sec, he was in the middle of strangling her.
Jesus Christ. Already off to a very bad start, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
The police officer removed the bar from her and checked for a pulse. Miraculously, Tali was still alive. He made the decision to save her rather than follow Rodney, who was now long gone. Holy cow. I will say, wasn't expecting her to still be alive.
Yeah. Tally's injuries were so severe that she spent 32 days in a coma. Her overall recovery took months and included her having to learn how to walk again. To this day, she maintains that she doesn't remember what happened to her, and I hope to whatever God or entity is out there that is true.
Me too.
Yeah.
I hope for as long as she wants that to remain unknown, that it remains unfucking known.
Absolutely.
There are interviews with her where she says that her father was in the music business. People like Jim Morrison would come to her house. He was obviously someone that everyone knew. And so when Rodney told her that he knew her dad, she believed him.
Yeah, she said in an interview, she's like, my house was like a rotating door of people. Like, her dad was very popular. He knew a lot of people. So when this guy was like, I'm a photographer, I know your dad.
That made sense to her.
He was like, okay, yeah, my dad's in the music industry. Of course he knows photographers.
For all she knew, he'd already been at her house before.
Exactly.
Right? Like, oh my God. After Rodney fled this horrific scene that he had created, he realized it was time to get out of LA and made his way to New York City, where he enrolled in NYU using the alias John Berger from 1968 to 1971.
During that time, he worked as a security guard to make ends meet and took classes taught by Roman Polanski himself.
Holy cow, this man has, like, how do you tiptoe this close to celebrity
The thing about this case that really blew my mind is this is the 70s. And we kind of saw this when we covered Charles Manson.
Well, yeah.
Is the paths of so many unexpected people in LA and New York would cross. And because he was in both LA and New York, we're going to see that a lot.
Craziness. If you're wondering where this all lines up, this was before the murder of Sharon Tate. That's crazy.
Mhm.
That's like when you find out that like Anne Frank and Martin Luther King were like born the same year.
Yeah.
Like it just in your head, you're like, those are two very different events.
Those are two different timelines.
Yeah. How could they possibly intersect this closely?
In 1969, he began working a summer job that's probably going to make all of you want to throw up in your mouth a little bit.
That's right, because he worked as a counselor at a drama camp for girls where he was the most popular counselor. He would do this for 3 summers in a row, this time using the alias John Berger with a U instead of an E.
Very creative guy.
Crazy. Oh, this makes my skin crawl. I hate.
You're going to be like, I'm not spoiling anything yet. You're all going to be wanting to like throw your phone by the end of this.
Yay. Well, we're all in this together.
We are. Exactly. And you know what? I'm going to say this right now. He's dead now.
Fuck yeah. Good for the rest of the world. That's what I say.
He basically died of old age, which pisses me the fuck off.
That makes
but
me a little sad.
At least he's dead.
As far as we know, though, he didn't victimize any of his students. I, again, praying to whatever entity, the universe, I hope he did not. I really hope he didn't.
I think there's 2 Rodneys. I really do. And we see this with people like Ted Bundy. There was the Ted that people knew where they were like, he's a nice guy.
He worked at a suicide hotline.
Yeah, what his coworker, he walked her to her car every night to know she was safe. And then there's Ted Bundy who would have sex with women's heads. You know what I mean? Like it's like 2 different people. And Rodney Alcala, he is also the epitome of this, which again makes him even more terrifying because he is the unsuspecting monster.
The fact that he had the balls to put himself on national TV amidst all of this, the audacity of men never seems to surprise me.
It sure doesn't.
In 1971, Rodney struck again. The problem is we don't know exactly what happened because, like Dina said earlier, Rodney never fully confessed to his crimes.
We do know that his MO was often to simply approach young women and tell them he was a photographer who wanted to take their picture. Due to his charm, they often let him. 23-year-old Cornelia Criley was one of these women.
She was a flight attendant who had just moved to the area. She likely accepted his help to move items into her new apartment.
We believe this because there were no signs of forced entry. At some point, she must have realized that she made a huge mistake, but unfortunately at that point, they were alone.
When she was found days later, her face was beaten almost beyond recognition, and there were deep bite marks on her breasts. One of her stockings was tied around her neck, and she was gagged using her bra.
Unfortunately, there were no witnesses around to tie Rodney to the crime. Not only that, this was the early 70s, and investigators had very little to rely on in terms of forensics, and once again, he got away.
Her murder would remain unsolved until 2011. That's so fucking tragic.
Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, police had convinced FBI to add the suspect of the Tali Shapiro assault to their 10 most wanted list.
Whoa.
Posters were distributed throughout the country with his name and his photo.
Now, was this Rodney Alcala?
Rodney Alcala.
Okay, got it. 2 girls who were attending the drama camp that he had taught at saw this poster and immediately called the police at a girls. He was extradited to California and set to appear in court. The Shapiro family had relocated to Mexico in an effort to shield their daughter from what had happened to her. They refused to let her appear in court to face the man who had left her for dead. Oh, that would be a heavy, heavy burden to carry, I will say.
Absolutely, because again, she said she didn't remember it. And so they were like, why should we left the country? Why should we victimize her? But these 2 girls, I want to talk about them for a second because I think we can relate to this.
Okay.
So these 2 girls, they're in drama camp together. They're, 2 little besties.
And you know what? As a girl who's also basically been to drama camp.
Yep.
very much. I get it.
Right? So these two girls, they like enjoyed freaking each other out a little bit. And so one day one of them goes and she's like, we should go to the post office because they have the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Let's go look at it and just like see who's on there because that is crazy. And they go in and there is Rodney Alcala, who again, they had his picture. So they're like, that's John Berger. What the hell?
I love this because that is the like 1970s equivalent of going through the like list of serial killers on Wikipedia with your friend. Amazing. I think these two girls are badass. I love that.
It was awesome. Yeah. And they immediately like, I mean, I wish this had made more of a difference, but we'll see.
Atta girls anyway. I'm proud of you. Rodney Alcala was allowed to plead for a far lesser charge of child molestation rather than attempted murder. He was paroled after a measly 34 months. Let me tell you, if I were her parents, there's no way I wouldn't take the law into my own hands.
No.
There's just no way. I would shoot that man and then turn myself in.
Yeah. Exactly. He got what was called an indeterminate sentence, it was popular around that time. Okay. So they gave him between 1 to 10 years, and it meant that he would be paroled after the board believed that he was rehabilitated. So as soon as they're like, yeah, he's fine, he was then added to the sex offender registry and he moved in with his mother.
Less than 2 months later, Rodney was arrested for violating the terms of his parole when he attempted to kill again. That, to me, says he doesn't deserve parole.
No.
You broke the rules.
Again.
In the worst way. Like, you didn't just, like, cross state lines and forget to tell your PO. You attempted to kill someone.
Less than 2 months. Like, he didn't wait.
Oh, my God. He was driving around Huntington Beach when he saw a 13-year-old girl named Julie waiting for the bus. He asked her if she wanted to see a pretty picture and get a ride to school. She obliged.
When he drove her past her school, she began to yell and attempted to jump out of the car. He grabbed her and took her to a secluded location. He then forced her to smoke a joint with him.
The pretty picture thing apparently is really working. I mean, it worked the first time. Why wouldn't you try it again?
He's smiley. He's charming. Like, you have to get... This is at the time where people, like, hitchhiking was a thing.
That is very true. You know? I forget that a lot of the time because, like, these days, if you see someone walking... I actually think it's illegal in Canada to pick up hitchhikers. Yep. So it's just not something... And you rarely see it happening.
Yeah. The thing is to remember here is not only was that common, but this is in the very middle of like active American serial killer time. So they haven't quite realized what the dangers really are. That fear hasn't been put into people.
Well, I think all of this happening at the same time is the reason why we have changed the way we sort of operate as a culture.
Absolutely.
Because of all this shit. Luckily, a ranger had smelled the cannabis and went along to investigate. He saw Rodney with the girl. He attempted to lie by saying the two were just taking a break after hiking. Julie told him that she was taken against her will and wanted to go home.
The ranger arrested both of them because of the cannabis. She was let go, but a background check was done on Rodney and his history was revealed. He was charged with kidnapping and possession and sent back to prison, this time for about 2 years.
So he's sentenced for the sexual abuse of a child, then released, and then he kidnaps another child and is released again.
Exactly.
This is not enough time.
No.
Even if you don't believe in the death penalty, this is not enough time. That's not enough time as a punishment, and it's not enough time as a rehabilitation.
Our guy on extra credit that we just talked about, that smuggled tarantulas, got more time, basically.
Oh my, he absolutely did.
Like, make it make sense.
Believe it or not, he convinced his parole officer to allow him to travel throughout the country. He then made his way to San Francisco, where he met a woman named Pamela.
We don't know a lot about what happened to her, other than the fact that her mutilated body was found on a hiking trail. Rodney then went back to New York City.
And for another timeline comparison, this was about a month before David Berkowitz was arrested for the Son of Sam murders. That's wild to me.
This story has so much like crisscross with all of these cases. And the thing is, like, everyone knows who Ted Bundy is.
100. Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone knows who David Berkowitz is. The Hillside Stranglers, we're going to talk about them. Very well-known crime. A lot of people don't know who Rodney Alcala was because he just kind of like picked the timing and he kind of just like slid under it all.
Exactly. He sort of weaved himself in everybody else's timelines.
Yes, absolutely.
On July 13th, 1977, Rodney approached heiress Ellen Hoover. She was 23 years old and the daughter of Herman Hoover, a nightclub owner.
Something I want to touch base on is we talk a lot about what is known as the less dead.
Yes.
So victims who police won't look into, usually due to their social standing. Rodney Alcala went ever whoever the hell he wanted.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think he was too concerned about the notoriety of his victims, like in a sense that like someone more famous would maybe get him caught faster. He didn't give a hoot.
He's not trying to hide. He's not trying to be sneaky, and he is getting away with it because of sheer carelessness. Because Ellen was so well known that her godfathers were Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin.
That's bonkers. I want them to be my godfathers.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be so freaking cool. Her friends would later say that she met a photographer she described as charming and flirty. He had convinced her to go on a lunch date with him. That day, she vanished. Rodney was only linked to this murder because her planner had meeting with John Berger written on that day.
She was actually linked to the Son of Sam murders because she matched the description of many of David Berkowitz's victims.
Well, which to me means he completely switched up his MO there then.
He did in a lot of ways. The one thing, though, is David Berkowitz, a lot of the time, he was a gun guy.
Yeah, he shot most of his victims.
She wasn't shot, but this was so early in the whole David Berkowitz thing that they hadn't really figured that out yet. They were just like, oh, she looks like all the other girls who have gone missing or have been killed. It must be David Berkowitz because there can't be two of these guys out here.
Yeah,
that would
heaven
be crazy.
forbid. Rodney was now on his way back to LA, and before he made it there, he was in Wyoming, where he met 28-year-old Christine Thornton, who was 6 months pregnant when she was murdered. She was only linked to Rodney because a photo of her would be found in his storage locker years later.
We also know because her earrings were found in the storage locker as well. This is something that would become a pattern for him, and soon after this, he began taking earrings from his victims as a trophy.
In LA, Rodney visited the LA Times and got a job working as a typesetter.
It was during that time that he was actually interviewed by the Hillside Strangler Task Force because he was a known sex offender.
Whoa.
He was ruled out, but they did arrest him for cannabis possession again, but again, didn't last long.
I guess California, even in the 70s, was not forgiving when it came to the weed.
No, he's a sex offender, but he got weed on him, sent him to jail.
Oh my God. During his stint with the LA Times, Rodney convinced everyone that he was a fashion photographer and would take photos of people for his portfolio.
He did this using his real name, which had appeared on the top 10 most wanted list and was tied to multiple crimes against children.
Just brazen. Like, he does not care. He's like, well, if they catch me, they catch me.
And the thing is, how would they know? You didn't have the internet back then. You couldn't like creep someone's Facebook. It was only a slight chance that if you knew the right person who looked into this stuff that they would find out. But back then you could be, we talk about this all the time. It was so much easier to be anonymous.
100%. And the 70s was not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. A coworker would later say of him that he would share very questionable photos with great pride. She said,
I thought it was weird, but I was young. I didn't know anything. When I asked why he took the photos, he said their moms asked him to. I remember the girls were naked.
Ew.
Mm-hmm. He had these photos of naked people. He'd be like, yeah, their parents wanted me to do this. And everyone was like, okay. But again, another theory that I read was that people were so, and you have to keep in mind like where this happened,
This
right?
is LA.
Yeah, in the 70s.
In the 70s.
You don't want to be unhip. You don't want to be uncool. You don't want to be a square. So people were like, yeah, cool.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Leanne Leadham, a coworker who he photographed, remembered that he also had countless pages of naked teenage boys and girls.
Despite all of this, he was considered cool and charming.
It's wild what people will look past sometimes.
I want to talk about the photos first.
Okay.
Because here's kind of how he got away with it.
Were they like artsy?
Yes.
See.
And that's the thing. A lot of you are probably thinking like, well, hello? Like,
okay, I will, because this is already a very dark story, obviously. In my mind, I was like, yes, it makes total sense that he would have like a Pokemon card style binder just full of like naked Polaroids of people.
That's basically what he had.
Oh, God.
No, that's basically what he had. And so he'd bring this like portfolio and there'd just be naked pictures. But because they were quote unquote artistic, people were like, well, I don't want to be like the uncool person who doesn't recognize art. So I'm just going to go ahead and say like, yeah, that's
or
cool.
it's like, I don't want to be viewed as like frigid or whatever because I'm shying away from the art. It's not a naked body, it's art.
Exactly.
And you know what? Art is in the eye of the beholder. If it makes you uncomfortable, it makes you uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
but these are minors.
Yeah, very true. On November 9th, 1977, he struck again. And this time, Rodney murdered Jill Terry Barkham. She was only 18 and had moved to LA in hopes of becoming an actress.
Once again, we don't know a ton about how she was killed. What we do know was that she was sexually assaulted anally and vaginally. She was beaten and strangled with her own clothing. This time, he posed her body and left her out in the open for someone to discover her, which again, Danny Rolling did the same thing. However, Danny Rolling did it so that the police would discover her.
Yes.
What he would do was just leave her out there for any random person to find her.
She was found with her knees bent up towards her chest and was nude from the waist down. Her death was not a quick one. Her nipples were almost bitten off and her pubic hair had been burnt.
There are details when it comes to this murder that I chose to leave out because I honestly don't think I'm going to stop thinking about them for a minute because what he did to her was horrific. He essentially tortured her to death.
There are a lot of serial killers out there that pose their victims in such a way that even after you've done everything to them that you could possibly do, the worst things in the world, and then you take their life and yet it's not over because A, someone still has to find them, whether it be police or a member of the public or their family or whatever.
Yeah.
And two, you're humiliating and degrading the body by posing it in such a way. It's just like endless.
It's one of those things where the idea is to victimize as many people as possible. I've already killed her, but I want to make sure this haunts everyone.
Police interviewed numerous people, including Marlon Brando, because she was found near his house. Despite this, they were no closer to finding out who had committed the heinous act against her.
What confused them was that this, like we mentioned, was during the Hillside Strangler murders, and Jill had actually known one of the victims. Her friend was killed by the Hillside Stranglers less than 2 weeks before her own murder.
Oh my God. The 70s were the 70s in LA and New York specifically.
Yeah.
Just a fucking wild time to be alive, apparently.
Yeah.
And we're going through pretty wild times as it is currently. Every day I'm like, oh, good Lord, anything else? But this 70s were bonkers. Craziness.
I think that he did all of this on purpose. We kind of touched on this, but I think he was killing women in areas that he knew there were other serial killers because he thought he could there's one of two things I believe. One is that he thought he would get away with it because it would be pinned on other serial killers. The other is I think in his conceited, messed up brain, he was like, oh, you want to see something really bad?
And also in that kind of sort of ego vein, if you will, he's kind of pissing in another big dog's territory.
Absolutely.
And he thought, okay, well, if I'm going to piss off and terrify the public, I'm also going to piss off and terrify another serial killer.
Yeah.
Little shitbag. I'm swearing a lot in this one. Sorry, guys. You're
it's upsetting.
Sensitive freaking ears, but like my ears are sensitive too. The NYPD were finally able to link the name John Berger to Rodney. They asked the LAPD to question him and give him a lie detector test. He refused and was unfortunately released because there was a lack of evidence.
One thing is they had fingerprints. So they did have some.
Okay.
But before they were able to link him to anything, there is no database for the fingerprints, but there's fingerprints. So we're halfway there.
Okay.
They just have these fingerprints and they kind of have to hope that he does leave some behind so that they can
match
check,
them up.
But he hadn't quite done that yet to a point where they had enough against him to demand his fingerprints, because it was his right to be like, no.
I guess so. And you know what? I will say, because we know of times in the past when things have flown under the radar because like two different jurisdictions aren't speaking with one another when it comes to law enforcement. So I will say, considering the fact that the NYPD and the LAPD sort of work together on this, kind of shocking. And it sucks that it still didn't really help in the end.
Especially because we've seen it when it's like two states that are next to each other. These are crimes happening across the country.
And even like state troopers to like a federal level. So like FBI, like notoriously they don't get along or like, you know, whatever, won't communicate. But I mean, it didn't really matter in this particular case anyway.
Around 1 month later, he struck again. This time, he broke into the apartment of 27-year-old Georgia Wixted. She was discovered when a welfare check was conducted on her after she didn't show up to work. Georgia was found posed naked on her bedroom floor and was strangled using her nylons.
Her apartment was covered in blood. Georgia was sexually assaulted, her genitals were mutilated, and her skull was caved in. They also found a bloody handprint.
3 months later, he killed Charlotte Lamb, who he left in her laundry room. Once again, she was found strangled and sexually assaulted. Her earrings were ripped out of her ears. And this made me hate my shared laundry room even more.
No kidding.
Because there are times where I'm like down at the dryer getting my clothes out and the door is right behind me. I'm not gonna do that anymore.
Head on a swivel, girl.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. She was posed on her back with her legs open and positioned towards the door. Again, so he's just doing this to make it as shocking and horrific for whoever finds them.
It was also around that time that a woman came forward sharing her experience with Rodney during a photography session. She stated to police that she believed he could be capable of murder.
But nothing came of this.
And despite all of that, Rodney Alcala appeared on TV in the living rooms all across the United States during an episode of The Dating Game.
And that, my friends, is where we will pick up next week.
And guess what? He's not even close to getting caught yet.
Okay, so I said before we started that I had debated watching the Anna Kendrick film, the new one that just came out. I wasn't sure if I wanted to watch it before we began this whole story or like what I wanted to do. And so kind of decided that I'm going to watch it in between episodes.
Perfect.
So that, especially now, that's where we're going to pick up. So that's kind of all about the movie or kind of around there. And I was kind of excited to watch it because I haven't watched a new movie in a really long time. And now I'm not, I don't know if I'm excited anymore.
It's, you know, it's a good movie. We saw it in theaters.
I love Anna Kendrick.
Me too. We saw it in theaters and I went into it as a true crime nut, because that is what we are.
Yes.
And I will say it isn't the most accurate movie, but one thing that she does is, again, she paints that picture of the dangers that exist out there for the average woman very, very well.
Okay.
And I think you'll enjoy the movie. Knowing what you know, like at the very end, they kind of do that whole thing where they'll share, through text kind of a little bit.
Oh,
afterwards.
Like the real.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember being there and I could just feel the energy in the room, in the theater, of people being like, oh my God.
Was it a lot of women watching?
It was a lot of couples.
Interesting. You know what? I don't wish to stereotype because guys love true crime just as much as girls do. But I feel like I thought it would be mostly women. But now that you said it's couples, I definitely feel like it's girlfriends and wives that are dragging their male significant others.
I wanted to go around the theater with our business cards and be like, here you go, here you go, here you go.
I mean, what better place,
Right?
Honestly. Hi, everyone. Excuse me, just 1 second.
I have an announcement to make, everyone. If you like this movie, please listen to our podcast.
That's so funny. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But also I'm apprehensive, shall we say.
This whole thing is upsetting. And I don't want to say a lot, but I will say the level of rage that you feel.
Oh, and I feel it all the time, so
it's going to be worse next week.
Okay, right on. I love that.
Because things do not get better. They get a lot worse. We often see cases, I think more often than not, where we see law enforcement fumble and fail, but it is on a whole other level with this story.
Yay. Anywho, so stay tuned, buckle up. I guess we always, well, I shouldn't say we always, but we often give a warning to like bring your blankie, get cozy, bring a cup of tea, do whatever you need to
bring a punching bag.
This requires some kind of, I don't know, catharsis, I think, after a rage room, perhaps.
We're going to find something lighter hearted to cover after this. If you have ideas or suggestions, thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com, let us know. But we're going to need it after this.
I think so, too. Alrighty. Well, it is that time of the episode again where we always thank our wonderful patrons over on Patreon. We give a shout out to our Grim VIPs at the end of all of our regular episodes. They are the top tier on Patreon, but you too can sign up. There's a few other tiers. We do episode reveals early, so you can get on that chain.
For free.
Yeah. If you like to see our faces as we are talking, then that's a good place for that too. We have video versions of the episodes up on Patreon for your viewing pleasure also. What else?
We have a Discord. We have all sorts of fun stuff, but we do want to thank our Grim VIPs. A huge thank you to Carrie, Atlantean Jedi, Bob, Brian, Hillary, Judy, Kevinus Musicus, Nova, Lisa, Steven Centauri, and Mayhem Mudkip.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Y'all are the bee's knees. Thank you so much for listening. This has been The Grim Curriculum. Today's fun fact is more of a question.
Okay.
How many knees do you think an elephant has?
Oh, you always stump me. 4?
No, they have 2 knees at the back, and the front ones are actually elbows.
Oh.
Yeah, so there you go. Fun fact for you.
Bye. Bye.